Thank you for that. This is giving some food for thought to the floor. So if I now may ask you to use your microphones. I think you have to switch it on, and then maybe share some of your views or comments, or already pose some questions to the panelists. Thank you. The floor is yours. François.
I have to sort out technology first.
Yes, and if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah. François Passant, the Executive Director of Eurosif. Since you kindly invited Eurosif to speak up, I'll take the invitation. Thanks, Jan. I'm very happy, actually, that the word investors has been mentioned 3 times in Richard Howitt's mouth. I think also the word shareholders has been mentioned before. And that's a big shift from a few years ago in terms of thinking about non-financial reporting. So I take this also as a positive sign, of course. Just for people who don't know Eurosif, I'll be a bit long just to elaborate. Who don't know Eurosif, we are the premier pan-European sustainable investment membership association. We are actually promoting sustainability for financial markets. Our direct members actually are drawn from the value chain of the investment, sustainable investment industry. They represent an excess of 1 trillion euros in assets under management. This is a sub-segment of the broader asset management industry, but a fast-growing one, actually. So that's the point. And that's why I think investors and shareholders should be interested in these proposals and are. It's because this segment of investors taking into account non-financial factors alongside traditional financial factors is actually growing twice as fast as the broad asset management industry. It's about 5 to 6 trillion euros today that are managed with some respects and considerations to non-financial factors. So it's not anecdotal, it's growing. It will actually, in a few years, become more the norm than the exception. And that's why Eurosif strongly supports the proposal that's been put forward by the European Commission as an important milestone. It's not the end of a journey, but it is a key milestone, and we reiterate our support to that proposal. We think it's important that it goes through. We live today in a world, let's not forget that, where 80% of a company's value is derived from intangibles. I look at Michel, we're smiling because I said exactly the same thing last week at the GRI conference. So 80% of a company's value is derived from intangibles. We live in a world today where there is a growing amount of academic literature demonstrating that there is a positive correlation between the corporate financial performance of a company and its CSR performance, and its access, and this provides a lower access to cost of access to lower cost of capital. We live in a world where supply chains are more global, more lean, and therefore more prone to non-financial risk. We live in a world where a growing amount of investors, including very large investors, are looking at how companies adapt to climate change. And therefore, this is not anecdotal. This is also why we're very happy to have signed this joint letter with ETUC, ECCG, and BOIC. Thank you.
Thank you, François. I take the benefit because of that point regarding shareholders or investors. I know that Michael Polja, you took quickly the floor this morning, but it might be interesting also for people to know what is it that in that Delphi project, which is extremely ambitious with a number of core mainstream investors, what you are doing in the same direction mentioned by Eurosif. I know there are many companies in the room, but I would like you to be a bit proactive and maybe explain, is it Letterbieke Mulder from First Solar? What are your shareholders telling you? What do they expect? Nothing? Are they silent, as it was mentioned this morning, or are they among the Boy Scouts or the proactive leaders within the investment community? Question mark. So don't hesitate also to react on these comments we just heard. Other inputs, please. Robin Edmé, if you can introduce yourself, Robin.
Robert Edmé, Senior Advisor responsible for finance at the French Ministry of Ecology. Very briefly, I'm a bit surprised about the debate in the sense that I think what we're discussing today is already accepted. I mean, the issue for extra financial or integrated reporting tomorrow is about materiality, and that's what the G4 has pointed out. And the second issue, in my view, is how are we going to make sure that the proposal of the Commission will go smoothly through the co-legislative process. Raffaele Baldassare and Richard Howitt said just before that they were supporting and they were very positive about the proposal. So why wouldn't it go fast enough? I understand that there are some member states which, as Victor said, and I would agree with that, a third fully supporting, a third neutral, and a third very negative about the... but in my view, those who are in a position which think it's negative, I mean, it's already history, in my view. So how can we accelerate the voting process? How can we convince those who oppose the regulation to support it? And I'll finish with that. How can some of your members, which are also members of Business Europe, can be so schizophrenic about the position? CSR Europe is supporting very strongly the proposal. Business Europe, as usual, for the past 10 years, is very negative regarding the proposals. So, I mean, how can we leverage the members within Business Europe to have changed Business Europe's position?
I think you will have a slight other version from Stefan Ketz later on what is being called a non-position of CSR Europe. And from time to time, silence can be more louder than any cry. And I think that action can work more than any words. So, but I think that Stefan will give you the whole nuance and the views of practitioners and also the view of schizophrenic companies, indeed. We have some demands from Irma, from the Dutch government, and please also Rodney from the International Integrated Reporting Initiative. And then at the very end, there also is a demand, and there I will keep it for this interaction, and then we go back to the panel. So 1, 2, and 3. Irma.
Yes, Jan, you asked for the opinion of the shareholders, and that was indeed a very good question, because some shareholders got to blame for this crisis, that they didn't take a long-term perspective on what companies were doing and investing in the wrong companies for that reason. I just wanted to air the outcome of the Ministerial Council in the Netherlands last Friday. We are positive on this proposal. We're also guilty, maybe a bit, how it turned out. Think
Irma, which proposal are you talking about? Because
sorry,
Friday
the transparency proposal from the Commission.
Sorry?
The transparency proposal from the Commission on corporate reporting.
Yes. So just to explain, last week there was a council here in Brussels, and in the conclusions there is a small phrase with regard to this proposal for non-financial information of companies, but I invite everybody to read that sentence very carefully, because I think that might also have strong impact on the negotiations.
I'm sorry, Jan, I'm talking about our Council of Ministers in the Netherlands.
Sorry, I thought it was this council here next door. Thank you, Irma. That's so good to clarify.
But first you have to cover our resistance at home. So that was the first thing. I just want to highlight that just one day before that ministerial meeting, some EU Medion, it's an assembly of institutional major investors, starting from the Netherlands, but they also have European colleagues, and they team up for good corporate governance. They brought out the paper and directed it to the Minister of Justice in the Netherlands to explain to him why this is a very good proposal and why this helps them to have the information, like Eurosif explained, to make the right decisions. The paper was also supported by the Dutch branch of European investments analysts. They agreed that this is what we need. We need flexibility for companies to bring up the data that is relevant for the company, not being too prescriptive, only indicate and make transparent what companies are doing, like you said. Just make it transparent what they do.
Okay. Thank you, Irma. And you were mentioning your Ministry of Justice. For your information, we had in the early drafts a representative of the German government, but since 10 days ago, the German Ministry of Justice launched a broad consultation towards 56 large organizations in Germany, and I think they're waiting for the 7th of June to see the results before coming out with any initial first proposals or comments and more formal reactions, although we have the temperature already, which was mentioned, I think, by Victor. So thank you. It also tells the virality of which ministers are going to embark in the negotiations. And that, I think, is also not neutral if you look who is going to take the lead in each country. Rodney, please.
I'm Rodney Irwin from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, not the Integrated Reporting Council, although we are good friends and we do work together quite a bit. I just want to say that there are business representatives in the room who do support this legislation in this direction. In fact, there are many businesses who doesn't think it goes far enough, and we do have many of our members who are actually calling for not only mandatory reporting, but rules that would allow our organisations to compete on performance and not on methodology. So maybe as an antidote to Business Europe, there are businesses that are actively engaged in this and are calling for this legislation, in fact, are even calling for it to go broader than it currently is. So business isn't always resisting change. In many cases, there are many that want this to come and come soon.
Great. Thank you, Rodney, and sorry for my mistake. We are having a lot of emails with the GRI, the World Business Council, RRC, and CISA Europe about a joint letter, and that maybe is explaining a little bit my confusion. Sorry for that again. But Rodney, it might be interesting maybe for later on to have an answer to a question that was put by Robin regarding how you experience with the members of the World Business Council, which we have a lot in common also here in the room, by the way, how you manage sometimes the schizophrenia of companies with regards speaking out with one consistent position towards this type of proposals. But we have also a question from the back. If you can introduce yourself.
Katerina Wallin Bureau, Burson Marsteller. I was just wondering what the distinguished panel thought about the Commission's proposal to report on diversity.
Thank you very much, and they are extremely well placed to answer your question. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think you have really received food for thought here, the panel. Thank you very much for your contributions, and if you want to make it also interactive, raise your hand, ask for the floor. You can use actively your micro, so let's keep it interactive. I would like now to invite, because of course it was a bit tough for me to first invite for 90 seconds to express an opinion on quite a complex issue. So if I could invite, is it Patrick Itchert, Maxime, and then Jérôme to hear from the stakeholders, I would say almost the social partners and the societal partners, if you add the NGO community to the two social partners. Where do you stand in terms of having a position, and what are the 2 or 3 arguments that you are going to use in the next days and weeks to come, and that will make the process, it was said by Robin again, that will make the process smooth or very complicated, or it might eventually even lead to collapse the proposal. That is to put some weight on your shoulders. So, Jérôme, Patrick et Maxime. Maxime.
Thank you very much. Business Europe is on the spotlight, and there were many interventions calling on us, asking why is it so that there is this schizophrenia in companies, and why Business Europe has such a position. I mean, I think in this room there are many people who are involved directly in CSR, and it's logical that those who are in companies responsible for undertaking these activities are more convinced maybe of the added value of a proposal going in the direction as suggested by the Commission. But companies, as it was said by several and many, are diverse, and Business Europe is the main representative organization of companies at European level from all perspectives. So we, of course, represent the management of companies as well as their shareholders. And we represent this through 41 national federations, confederations of businesses, large and small, which are from the private sector in 35 countries. So we cooperate very closely with CSR Europe, and we are aware of some differences of views on some occasions. But I think we share very much one key principle, which is that the way in which CSR is growing, developing, which is to make it relevant for companies, and therefore making sure that the external stakeholders, in this case governments or other stakeholders, would not interfere with a process which is critical for CSR to add value, which is that you adapt what you are doing. And it's, again, I repeat that, beyond legislative requirements, adapt what you're doing to your own needs. And of course, the engagement with stakeholders is part of the picture. But we are convinced that in order to be successful, each company should be able to consider freely how to do it, what to do, and also whether to do something, whether it is relevant. That's why the voluntary nature of CSR for us is a very important pillar. And I think the initiative that we are discussing today is linked and rooted into the Commission's communication of 2011, when the renewed strategy on CSR was proposed, and as part of that, a new definition of CSR was proposed, which was the responsibility of enterprises for their impact on society. And it was highlighting the need for enterprises to have in place a process to integrate social, environmental, ethical, human rights and consumer concerns in business operations and core strategy. That definition for us moved away quite significantly from the voluntary nature of CSR already, and it was moving towards a sense of obligation from companies. And we felt, when reading the communication at the time, that there was a perception in the Commission, which is also, I think, prevailing in the discussion that we're having on the disclosure initiative. And this perception is that we are in a crisis, that business is responsible for it, and that for that reason it's important to force business in doing more or differently. And on that, I think there is a very clear neglection of the fact that businesses are involved in society, and this is at the core of their mission, by providing the conditions for growth and jobs, by creating jobs for people, by providing products and services that are useful for people, and this is the main goal of businesses. So we felt that there was a very negative color given to the activities of businesses, when in fact in Europe what is happening nowadays is clearly a competitive, very critical situation, and we see unemployment soaring, as it was mentioned, in particular in some countries. But altogether, I think our continent is really facing a very hard time to make sure that the policies are in place, and this covers a lot of issues, energy, climate change being part of it, but also on employment issues, having the right labor market conditions is a very important element. And we should certainly think of this if we want to have a social Europe, well-functioning and financed social services, and a collection of taxes at the level we want to ensure the well-being that we've been used to. And we defend as Business Europe the European model of society that has been built over the last decades. So that's a first principle point. Then I think there is another which is more linked to this initiative in particular, which is the fact that CSR, and I think the Commission still, in its communication, recognizes that it's important that each company can find its own solutions and that it would be business-driven. But on the other hand, when you take a step through regulation at European level to make reporting on CSR, disclosure of non-financial information compulsory, of course, this will have an impact, and there is a link between the CSR activities and the reporting on CSR. And we feel that listing a number of issues in a European legislation, also listing what companies should disclose as information, and in particular the risks element of it for us is problematic because it's about business confidential information or potentially sensitive information with a competition. This approach for us moves the CSR process, which is a very positive process, we believe, into a ticking the box exercise where you have a number of issues and you need to say something about that, even though it's perhaps not relevant to your operations. So we feel that first it's not necessary because the trends are positive, and second it could leave companies doing something which is not really what they need. So instead of that, we believe that the Danish model, and I'm happy that a representative of the Danish government is present in the debate, which has seen indeed the development of CSR reporting to a very significant extent, 94% of companies was mentioned before, which is based on a comply or explain approach, and the Commission has used that, also considered it in its proposal, but we feel that a broader approach to comply or explain should be followed when looking at the issue of CSR reporting. Yes?
May I ask maybe to come to one or two last arguments?
Yeah. Perfect. I will do that. So that was a bit on the content of the initiative, and my last argument will be on the costs and the associated burdens. It was mentioned that the cost will not be so high. The Commission has assessed it to be between 1,200 euros and 5,300 euros. We feel that this is an underestimation of the real costs that companies will have to face. And the reason is that the direct cost linked to the drafting of a statement, which were taken as a basis by the European Commission based on a very limited sample of companies, are not an adequate basis of calculating the cost, because companies will have to put in place, and of course the fact that many companies will be covered, 18,000 companies, so it's not only the large companies, but a lot of medium-sized companies are part of the scope of that initiative. We feel that the cost of establishing the tools which are necessary to measure, to control, and to coordinate within the company the information will be much higher than what was said by the Commission. And another study recently, the Center for Strategy and Evaluation Services calculated that the disclosure requirements would lead to some cost around 155,000 euros to 604,000 euros. So it shows that there is a diversity of appreciation. Looking at diversity, it was questioned. I conclude with that, saying that for us, there are many initiatives in this area at national level in the form of code of conduct and others, and before any legislation would be considered at European level, it would be important to share good practices, to see how it is happening in the countries, and that an appreciation of what exists already would be done before any further steps would be taken. Thank you, and sorry for being a bit long.
No, thank you, Maxime. And I think you are deserving a little bit more time, because I think you made a good point. If we would have here a room full of legal affairs of companies, there would also be another tone in the room. And I think really taking time to really articulate your arguments is important for us to know. I would like to invite, not now directly, but to park the questions about what you mentioned. We have issues regarding the way the Commission is asking for companies to display or to disclose about their risks. The cost issue you have also raised, and I think also that you had some elements but we heard that also in other forums about the monitoring or the auditing element. But so for Jasper and Michel Bond from Solvay, but of course some other companies could intervene about these key arguments that were put forward by Maxime, and of course later on Ernst and others might come back on these issues of costs and risks. So if I can ask Patrick Itchett from ETUC, what would be the 2 or 3 arguments or expectations you have with regard to the current text? So what is it that you put into the plate of the Parliament and the Council for them to consider?
Well, I think that Raffaele, Richard and Victor have given perfectly all the arguments in favor of the proposal. And I like what Victor said on the exit strategy of the crisis at the higher end and not the lower end. As I said it, I'm coming from, I have a textile background. In 85, the unit labor cost of a Belgian who was working in a factory was 40% of a white t-shirt, but 5% of technical textiles. The question is, what does Europe want to do? Are we reducing the 40% or are we increasing the share of the technical textiles? And I think in that sense, CSR is obviously one of the parts. Two, we were really thankful to the Commission to have changed the definition. Ruggie, it is a mix, and it's true, it's done. It is a mix of voluntary and compulsory. We lost far too many months to fight about that one. Now, the 4 elements on which we would like an improvement. 1, risk. It's true, risk. We have to be consistent. The definition, Ruggie, the definition of the Commission is talking about impact. 2, the scope. It's too narrow. We have to involve the supply chain. I talked about Bangladesh. It's crystal clear. 3, the framework. It's too flexible. I do agree that one size doesn't fit all. I agree on that one. But we do not want a pick and choose exercise. And it was striking, I'm a trade unionist, that one of the first studies done by the ILO, 250 codes of conduct, comme par hasard, 47% of them were pointing at child work, and, but only 17% to the respect of fundamental rights and trade union rights. No, you cannot pick and choose. And the idea of having a comparison, it is key. If we have to pay tribute to those who are progressive and who invest in that one. It's not a cost, it's an investment. And I think that the consumers need, and investors need that transparency. Finally, we do strongly believe that worker reps, trade unionists are not a stakeholder as another one. They are part of the company. And I know that some are a little bit chilly against that one, but I can say I was part of many European Works Council, and we helped the companies by saying, guys, we have information. You are not behaving properly in Morocco. You are not behaving properly in Vietnam and Cambodia. We can help you to get out of that one. It would be stupid to shoot ourselves a bullet in the foot. So 4 points: risk, scope, framework, and worker reps. We do believe that they have to be part of the making up of the report, and that they, as a Works Council afterwards, they can have a positive input.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Jérôme, from the European Coalition of Corporate Justice, you had a public hearing also, I think 2 weeks ago now, in the Parliament. And if you can give the tone about how you position yourself, and if I might ask again, what is it that you will almost display in the Parliament and at the Council level towards governments in terms of the arguments telling, as you have said very earlier in this session that this is maybe a missing opportunity. You were elaborating the 4 challenges, but if you can materialize almost some of your arguments, which is more than just an opinion, if I can say so. Jérôme?
Thanks. Before indeed developing these challenges and making them as concrete as possible, I just want to share a strong call from civil society, from NGOs, from affected communities. A lot of this debate has been about the business case for reporting. What does reporting on non-financial issues matter to the company's performance? It's not only about the business case, it should be also about the social case. You don't respect human rights because it is profitable or improves your performance. You do it because it's what international norms and laws prescribe. You do it because it's part of your social license to operate. You do it because you want to restore the lost trust that citizens have in business. A survey shows that 4 out of 10 European citizens feel companies have an overall negative impact on society. You do it because it's about people's lives, it's about the planet. So if you don't take a strong consideration of these different stakeholders, of the citizens, of the consumers, you end up with the kind of reporting that is now on the table, which is, as I said, a welcome step forward, but it's not one that meets the expectation of a large part of the society. It will not enable some of the stakeholders, company stakeholders, to assert their rights and fulfill their role. Concretely about these challenges, Patrick told about risk. And I explained in my short introduction that we believe there are 2 kinds of risk. The risk companies face, the material risks, and the risk that companies pose on society that may turn into a material risk at some point. All the aspects of risks need to be considered. We don't expect companies to disclose each and every risk and impact in very complex global supply chains. But we believe that there should be information on the most severe risks. And what are the severe risks? Are the ones that are more likely to materialize or have already occurred and have materialized, and the ones that would have the most severe consequences and impacts. It doesn't come out of the blue. It builds on the notion of human rights due diligence proposed in the UN Guiding Principles. What does it mean concretely? I see many people afraid about this identification of risks. It's about common sense, obvious, basic risks. Let's not over-complexify this. It's about the risk that the building collapses and kills thousands of people. It's about the risk that an oil spill devastates kilometers of land. It's about the risk that human rights defenders are beaten by private security. If a company just doesn't know what these risks are, just ask the people on the ground, just ask the workers, just ask the communities. Second element I wanted to raise is about the comply or explain. Of course, it was not the preferred option for civil society, this flexible comply or explain mechanism. We can live with it if it's a real robust comply or explain. In the first draft legislation, they talked about a reasoned explanation for not reporting. And then I think in the final version, it's about an explanation. I don't know why this word reasoned has suddenly disappeared. We think that there should be a reasoned explanation and based on a thorough risk assessment analysis. Third element is about indicators, and Michel insisted that it's important to have these indicators. They are important if you want to create shared value. And I take the example of resource use management. A study from the Commission concluded that the EU industry could yield up to 600 billion euros in net benefits through greater resource efficiency. And of course, society and the planet would also benefit from reducing pressure on resources. So shared value strategies could be effectively delivered here. But as Drucker says, only what gets measured gets managed. And often companies lack the systems and tools to gather such data. In this case, there is a resource efficiency roadmap promoted by the Commission and the Parliament. There's a set of key indicators on land, GHG emissions, etc. There are opportunities to create shared value. About compliance and enforcement, too often the legislation is not properly, the objectives are not met just because there is a lot of non-compliance. So we need monitoring and control mechanisms. One idea, and it comes from existing consumer law, the law on greenwashing, there's a possibility for interested parties to challenge the information, some misleading information. So that could be one of the options to make sure that legitimate parties can challenge these non-financial reports. The last element I would like to raise is about guidance. And we agree there needs to be guidance for companies on what are the appropriate indicators, on how you do report your risks in specific issues or specific contexts. Companies need this guidance, these tools, the capacity building, and civil society believes it is important and would like to be involved in this. So I would just conclude by saying that I really believe that these proposed changes are pragmatic, are sensible, they make sense. The identification of those severe risks and the management of these risks is consistent with companies' thinking, and disclosing this is consistent with the expectations of shareholders, investors, and stakeholders' expectations.
Thank you, Jérôme. And I would like to move, and we have to move a little bit quicker because we are taking time from the coffee pause, but we started a bit later, so we have some marge de manœuvre. I would like to go to Michel Bond and Victor Kirch from governments. I think you received already quite a lot of arguments that might eventually influence your marge of maneuver in negotiations. So if you could already react, Michel Doussin, Victor Kirch, on what you have heard, and then I will park some of the questions and arguments we received from Business Europe, ETUC, and the European Coalition of Corporate Justice for Jasper and Michel Bond. So, Michel?
Thank you. I was afraid that I'd be invited only for 19 seconds.
C'est Michel Doussin.
Not on my best. Firstly, I would like to say that please forget the ideological debate regarding mandatory and non-mandatory government role in economy, and please open your eyes. There is an open sky laboratory whose name is France. It exists now for 12 years. You can come and look at the figures, because we are debating about figures. You see that the companies which are the most profitable, I mean the larger companies, which are the most profitable, which receive awards regarding the quality, are those which receive awards regarding the quality of the reporting. Their names are L'Oréal, Danone, and so on. Okay, so when you say the burden of reporting is something terrible for the profitability of a company, I say bullshit. And I invite you to come and look at the figure. There is a group of 100 companies. The name is Observatory on Social Responsibility, Corporate Social Responsibility, ORS. They have worked on the question of reporting. They have a website dedicated to reporting. It's www.reporting.org, I think. You see their reports, you see their independent reports on that. And there is no report explaining that if France has economic difficulties at the moment, it's due to reporting. At the contrary, the companies which are the most gaining the shares of the market are those which report. Then, and regarding the cost, you have also the figures. It's absolutely wrong to say that it's a burden, even for the medium-sized companies. Then we see something which is very important in France, but also in other countries, and in Germany, which is that the question of reporting is taken seriously by the business. And groups of companies are working on the challenge of interpreting the new international standards which were adopted between 2011 and 10 and 11. That means ISO 26000, the OECD guidelines, the UN guidelines on business and human rights. And those three standards are very much challenging regarding a series of questions, which are the questions the civil society raises in relation, for instance, with Bangladesh at the moment. And the question of what are the responsibilities concretely of companies in their supply chain, and how to report on the supply chain, because to report is the first step to be transparent and to put in place a methodology to get information regarding your suppliers. And not only supply chain, value chain, because in the OECD guidelines, and taken from the UN principles, it says that the responsibility of a company is a company regarding its business relation, which goes far further than the supply chain. And there is a place in Europe, there are places in Europe where the question is really at stake. It's NCPs, the national contact points, because there is a real flow of claims which now are on the table of those NCPs regarding how to interpret those international standards, and particularly the OECD guidelines, with this question of supply chain. And this clearly pushes for improvement in the methodology of reporting because it's an advantage for companies to have clarified their relation with their supply chain through reporting. And in France in particular, there is a lot of reflection on that, reflection shared between the business and the rest of the society. During the presidential election period, 18 organizations from AFEP, which is the biggest companies, private companies, 2 stakeholders, including the MEDEF, our main business organization, wrote to the new president and asked him to create a permanent platform for stimulating the reflection concerning CSR as in general. But the first topic of the agenda of this platform is reporting. We want now to work with the civil society, wrote the business organization, regarding developing methodology on reporting. So from a French point of view, we are, since the beginning of this morning, forgetting the experience of a country, but also Denmark has now 5 years of experience, something like there is an ideological debate. People keep to the idea that any intervention of the state is by nature something which is against the business, against the economy, and against the progress. Please open your eyes. Look at what is concretely being put in place in different countries. We are ready to discuss about that. And the initiative we took with the German Sustainable Development Council, I have not time to develop, is in this mood. We observe that in Germany there was also this kind of debate, this kind of reflection between business and the civil society within an independent body. They have elaborated a codex which is voluntary. They identified 20 key topics on which a company should report, and we give them the possibility to discuss with us. In our country, it's 42 topics, not indicators, which are required from the company to report on. And we have started a discussion. Can we harmonize? Can we try to elaborate something which could one day, in discussion with other countries, we are open to that, be something of standard, European standard, which would be pedagogic for the companies, voluntary in certain countries, mandatory in others. We have opened the discussion, and we are ready to integrate all of you who would be interested.
Thank you, Michel. Quick, sharp, to the point, and thank you very much for your effort there.